Le 26 février 1993, une bombe explosa dans les parkings souterrains de la tour nord du World Trade Center à New York. Elle fit 6 morts et des dizaines de blessés. L'explosion éventra plusieurs niveaux dans les souterrains de la tour, mais ne mit pas en péril l'intégrité structurelle de l'édifice. Le FBI remonta très rapidement aux coupables, un groupe d'islamistes mené par un certain Ramzi Youssef. Plusieurs d'entre eux furent condamnés par la suite à la prison à vie. Depuis ce jour, le sentiment de sécurité des Américains, qui s'étaient toujours sentis à l'abri sur leur territoire, fut mis à mal pour toujours. Voici comment débutait un documentaire de la série The FBI Files, consacré précisément à l'attentat de 1993 contre le World Trade Center.
I'm Jim Kellstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Terrorist bombings are what happen in other countries, not here in the United States. And yet, in 1993, it happened in New York City. The World Trade Center bombing rattled our notion of domestic security. It shook the foundation of our belief that we're not vulnerable to terrorism. The cracks it caused in our self-confidence can never be repaired. If it happened once, could it happen again? It was the question in everyone's mind.
Dommage que ce soit précisément le FBI qui ait sponsorisé l'attentat de 1993 au World Trade Center. Le procès mit en effet en évidence le fait que c'est le FBI qui avait fourni aux terroristes le matériel pour confectionner la bombe, au travers d'un de ses infiltrés, l'ex-militaire égyptien Emad Salem, spécialisé dans la fabrication de bombes.
There is some evidence that the FBI may have known of the plot in advance through an informant and might even have stopped the bombing that killed 6 people. Correspondent Jacqueline Adams has the story.
FBI agents might have been able to prevent last February's deadly explosion at New York's World Trade Center. They discussed secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, but they didn't, according to the FBI's own informant, Emad Salem. Unbeknownst to the FBI at the time, Salem recorded many of his conversations with his handlers. In one, Salem complains to an FBI agent, "Since the bomb went off, I feel terrible, I feel bad, I feel here is people who don't listen." The agent replies, "Hey, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't try and I didn't try. You can't force people to do the right thing."
Voici un autre extrait des enregistrements où l'on voit Salem confirmer que la bombe a été fabriquée sous la supervision du FBI.
We start already building the bomb, which went off in the World Trade Center. It was built by supervision from the Bureau and the DA, and we was all informed about it, and we know that the bomb start to be built. By who? By your confidential informant.
Ted Gunderson est un ex-agent du FBI qui, après avoir quitté ses fonctions, a dénoncé l'implication de sa propre agence et de manière plus générale du gouvernement américain dans tous les principaux attentats survenus aux États-Unis au cours de ces 20 dernières années.
Oklahoma City, the first World Trade Center bombing, the second World Trade Center bombing, were all orchestrated, and our government knew about it. And in some cases, like the first World Trade Center, they furnished the explosives and the training for these guys.
Et revoici ce même Gunderson qui commente l'implication du FBI dans le premier attentat du World Trade Center, celui de 1993.
As a result of testimony in the trial and the informant, the FBI informant in the trial, a fellow named Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer.
Emad Salam.
Right, he was the informant for the FBI, and he recorded his conversations secretly with this. So when it came time for trial, he said, "Hey, wait a minute, here's what really happened." Now, he told the FBI in advance that they were going to bomb it. He was assigned, given the assignment to put the bomb together, and he went to his supervisor, his FBI supervisor, and said, "We're going to put a dummy bomb in here, right?" And the FBI supervisor said, "No, we're going to put a real bomb."
Le juge Andrew Napolitano a réalisé pendant plusieurs années les analyses politiques pour la chaîne Fox News. Dans cette émission, où il parle de 17 affaires d'attentats apparemment déjouées par le FBI, il explique que ce même FBI infiltre et parvient à convaincre les différents groupes d'aspirants terroristes à préparer ces attentats. Exactement comme ils l'ont fait dans le cas du World Trade Center.
But the more curious cases are the remaining 17 for which the federal government has taken credit. They all have a common and reprehensible thread. They were planned, plotted, controlled, and carried out by the federal government itself. In all of these 17 cases, from the Fort Dix 6 to the Lackawanna 7 to the Portland Parade bomber, the feds found young men of Muslim backgrounds, loners who were bitter at America. They befriended them, cajoled them, and persuaded them that they could change the world by killing Americans. In all these cases, agents worked undercover and portrayed themselves to the targets as Arabs of like un-American mind. In some cases, the federal agents used third parties to act as middlemen. The third parties were typically persons who had been convicted of crimes and who, in return for leniency at their own sentencings, were willing to work with the same feds who prosecuted them in order to help the feds entrap whomever else those feds were pursuing.
Voilà, selon Ted Gunderson, le motif pour lequel le FBI se serait impliqué de manière directe dans tous les principaux attentats de ces dernières années sur le sol américain.
Okay, back in the 80s, 1980s, the Department of Justice proposed legislation to fight terrorism. And this legislation took away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties. One of the authors, a female attorney with the Department of Justice, publicly made this statement, I've got her name on my file someplace, that before this passes, people will have to be killed. Well, so that was the reason, I feel, for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, the good guys, there were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation.
Une affirmation que vient corroborer l'écrivain Steve Emerson, auteur du livre American Jihad.
I heard it repeatedly after the 93 World Trade Center bombing by saying they didn't kill enough people. It wasn't said by militants, it was said by FBI agents. They didn't say it because they wanted more blood, but they understood that it would take more blood in order to get the government to react.
8 ans plus tard, ils ont finalement obtenu satisfaction.